It's a Minky San off of YouTube. How you doing? This is for Minky San's other channel. So this is what it's called. It's Minky San's other channel. It's weird, isn't it? I don't know why I called it that. I just had to come up with a name quickly and I was tired. So I'm going to talk about Brexit today. I'm just going to... if I quickly explain my standpoint at the moment, you'll know where I'm coming from. I wasn't sure which way to sort of vote. I was kind of feeling a little bit undecided. But I was getting really perturbed by the fact that there's a lot of fear-mongering from the government, from the official bodies that sort of speak for the government, the press, the media, the BBC, those places that kind of sing the government's tune, if you like. That was saying that we're just basically trying to make us scared to leave. Al-Qaeda will come and get us! Watch out, ISIS are behind them and they're going to... A lot of crazy fears. And a lot of fear-mongering makes me think, well, why? What can you not stand up on the facts? Or the facts not stand up for themselves? Do you need people to be too scared to leave? So that immediately makes me think, right, I'll question stuff. But I have a big fear, and it's that people aren't like me. Most people aren't like me. Well, no one else is like me. I'm kind of unique, aren't I? So are you. But people aren't like me in the fact that if I don't like something, I'm suspicious. I'm a suspicious person. And if I don't like it, I will research it. I'll go and find out the information, but a lot of people won't. I'm not clever or any of those sorts of things. I just like to be informed when I make a decision. A lot of people will just listen to what's on the news and believe what they're being told. And will then, and what I've noticed is we'll spout facts that they've heard from the television. And those could be facts, but they're not substantiated facts. They're just nonsense. Why would ISIS attack? We won't be able to work with these security people in Europe. Well, why? Why can't we work with Europe? And just because we leave Europe and stop paying into it, why wouldn't we be able to... So anyway, that was where I stood. So I stood on a kind of I wasn't sure. Now I've read through the facts and seen what people are saying. I'm pretty positive. I'm 99% sure I'm going to be voting to leave Europe. So that's my standpoint. If you disagree with that, that's fine. But I'm going to read through some of the EU myths and the truth. And this is from the Get Britain Out campaign. So these are going to be slanted to the out. But I think that they make good points and they countermand some other things. There's some other stuff that says different things to this, but I'm not really interested in that because I feel that we should leave for many, many reasons. I'll also point out that I don't think we should leave because of immigration. I don't think we should leave for... My main reason for thinking we should leave Europe is the fact that we need to regain our sovereignty. We need to be making decisions about ourselves, and we certainly need to be voting for the people that are making decisions about us, not unelected EU bureaucrats that are making decisions for us when we have had no say in who they are. We could have some real right-wing Nazis running the place and we wouldn't have a clue because we don't have any say in who they are, yet they tell us what we do every day. Anyway, okay, let's go. Myth number 1. Brexit would damage trade with our European neighbours. Europhiles claim leaving the EU would sour diplomatic and trade relations with other member states, making it harder for Britain to trade within the single market. The truth. British businesses do not need the EU to trade. In addition to the lucrative trade and investment deals with the rest of the world, Britain imports more from the EU than it exports to the EU. This means we are the EU's biggest customer, larger than China and the US, and no business, let alone the EU, would want to cut off ties with such a valuable customer as Britain. Can you imagine France wanting to damage sales of French cheeses, wines and champagne to Britain? Germany damaging sales of BMW and Mercedes cars to Britain? No. Trade will carry on as normal without the political interference we currently suffer from Brussels. And that, to me, makes perfect sense. A business does not care about borders. Multinational businesses certainly don't care about borders. They have their own rules. They pay taxes where they feel like it. Why is a business going to give a monkeys whether we are part of an organisation or not? We could be a part of the American English trade organisation and France would still sell us stuff because we will buy. And we buy more from Europe than we sell to Europe. So, yeah, that's a very big one for me. That says a lot of the fear campaigns around the GDP dropping, our exports dropping, losing all these jobs because they're all tied to exporting goods is going to die. If they stop buying our stuff, we'll stop buying theirs. start making our own. I think we'd quickly turn things around, wouldn't we? Myth number 2: Britain cannot survive economically outside the EU. We are told Britain cannot compete in the world without help from the EU, and without EU membership, we would not have access to the single market. Europhiles argue we need to be part of a trade bloc in today's globalised world, ignoring successful independent countries all over the world. Truth: Britain will thrive economically outside the EU. Britain is a global trading power and exports more to the rest of the world than it does to Europe. Britain has the world's 6th largest economy and is set to become the largest in Europe by 2035. The EU's share of world GDP is in terminal decline. In 1980, the EU's world share of GDP was 26%. It is now just 20% and will have fallen to 15% by 2020. Currently, all Britain's trade deals must be negotiated by the EU, which on average take twice as long or more to agree and finalise than those negotiated by independent countries such as Switzerland. I think did Canada just take 7 years to negotiate a trade deal with Europe? I think that's right. And I guarantee it wasn't because Canada was dragging its heels. Yet that's cited as a reason. Well, look how long it took Canada. 7 years to negotiate a trade deal. When we're talking about countries, we should be talking about hundreds of years, shouldn't we? Negotiating deals that are going to benefit us for a long time to come, for our children. So, myth number 3. Britain's membership of the European Union can be substantially reformed. For the past 40 years, successive British Prime Ministers have tried to make our EU membership work for Britain. So far, whether it was Margaret Thatcher's hardline stance or Tony Blair's supine grovelling, none have succeeded in positively changing the terms of our long-term EU membership. Well, they haven't. So I think that's the pro bit, which is all negative. Let's go for the truth. Substantial change to our relationship with the EU can only be achieved by Brexit. David Cameron has already stated his intention to stay within a reformed EU. Many fear this to be a replay of Harold Wilson's ill-fated 1975 referendum, in which a largely cosmetic renegotiation misled the public into staying. EU leaders have already ruled out any weakening of the principle of freedom of movement and want to retain open borders. Once Britain states her intention to leave the EU by using Article 50, a 2-year negotiation period will take place. This will include reinstating border controls for all citizens coming into Britain. Britain will be free to negotiate the more favourable terms we want and need. Research by Open Europe estimates a free trading Britain outside the EU could increase its GDP by 1.6%. Now, I was reading just this morning that a lot of pundits are suggesting that actually GDP will drop by up to 6.7%. So, you're going to have to make an informed decision yourself about who to believe, basically, on those figures. I personally don't believe a lot that's in the press because it seems to be spouting government propaganda. I think that's terrible to say that, but I think it is just propaganda. The fear-mongering is what makes me know it's propaganda, really. I think it is propaganda. Anyway, myth number 4. Britain will lose influence in the world. The pro-EU lobby say Britain will lose its influence on the world stage. The truth is, Britain would have more say on trade and regulation. Britain has opposed 55 EU directives since 1986 and has been outvoted every time. So the myth Britain currently wields any influence in Brussels is nonsense. Our EU membership gets us nowhere. In addition, it is estimated 70% of decisions made in the EU Council of Ministers are already implemented before they reach the voting stage, and that I can well believe. An independent Britain would regain its own seat within international institutions such as the World Trade Organization, in which Britain can pursue its own national interests. There are no other major international organisations which EU fully represents us, largely smaller fisheries bodies, etc. So at the moment, we don't represent ourselves at the World Trade Organization. Europe does it for us. Bureaucrats, people who we didn't vote for, make decisions for us and negotiate for us. And I don't see that as a good thing at all. Okay, myth 5. Britain would lose 3 million jobs. So if we... I'm not going to read this bit. I'm just going to ask you a question that you should ask yourself. If these companies, these large companies that want us to stay within the EU, lose their kind of unlimited source of extremely cheap minimum wage labour, i.e. Polish, Russian, Romanian, all that sort of, the Eastern Bloc countries that come here because minimum wage is still a lot of money. If they lose those people, where will the jobs go? How will people be unemployed if there's less people in looking for work and companies need people? I know, they'll have to pay more wages. Let's stay in the EU. Just a little thought there. Maybe you should think on that. The big companies want us to stay in because otherwise they're going to not make as much profit. £20 billion a year isn't quite enough money. Is a profit. Anyway, myth 5 again. Britain would lose 3 million jobs. This myth originated from a report by the National Institute for Economic and Social Research in 2004. The report incorrectly stated 3.2 million British jobs associated with exports to the EU would be lost if we come out of the EU. What we say we're leaving, we leave the next day. Leaving the EU will create far more jobs for Britons in the long term. This myth assumes the 228 billion worth of goods and services Britain exports to the EU would drop to zero the day after Britain leaves the EU. This was comprehensively refuted by the Treasury civil servants in August 2014. Moreover, the director of the National Institute of Economic and Social Research in 1999, Martin Will, has since confirmed the report does not claim 3 million jobs rely on our EU membership, denouncing this Europhile propaganda as pure Goebbels. I think that's a polite way of saying bollocks, isn't it? It's just complete bollocks. Myth 6. Britain will be isolated on the world stage if we leave the EU. We are told Britain must be a member of the European Union in order to have influence in the world. We're the 6th largest economy in the world. How can we not have it? Britain will be able to work close. The truth is, Britain will be able to work closer with our natural allies in the Commonwealth and the rest of the world. The EU is not the sole international organisation in the world. Britain is already a leading member of NATO, and we have a seat on the UN Security Council. We have cultural and historic links with countries all over the world and are regarded as the world's leading soft power state. All of this is unrelated to our membership of the EU. The United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, Hong Kong. Britain has strong ties with all of these important global self-governing nations. By leaving the EU, we will have the independence of action to cooperate more with our allies within the Commonwealth while still retaining friendly relations within Europe. Of course we will. Of course we will. We can negotiate our own trade deals. We don't need the bureaucrats in Brussels to be able to do that for us. We can stop the nonsense legislation by Brussels, by unelected officials, for us at least, and we can go back to our own sovereignty and start negotiating our own trade deals. We're the 6th largest economy in the world. We can certainly negotiate our own trade deals. So that's bullshit. Utter bullshit. Myth 7. The EU protects democracy in Europe. The European Parliament portrays itself as the guarantor of democracy in Europe. The truth is, Westminster protects democracy in Britain. The European project destroys democracy by replacing nationally elected politicians with unelected bureaucrats. On the rare occasion the EU has consulted the electorates of member states, such as in referendums held by the Netherlands and Ireland, to ratify the constitutional treaty, the results were rejected by the EU. The constitutional treaty was repackaged as the Lisbon Treaty, with minor alterations. Brussels then forced the Netherlands and Ireland to vote again to approve the Lisbon Treaty. The European Parliament cannot propose legislation. It is only able to approve or reject legislation proposed by the unelected European Commission. As such, it is a toothless institution. The European Commission's rulings bypasses Westminster, ensuring laws voted through the European Parliament are forced upon Britain. Furthermore, our limited influence in Brussels ensures European laws can be implemented even if all British MEPs voted against them. That to me is insane, isn't it? Myth 8. The EU has stopped seeking greater political powers for Brussels. Many believe we have reached the high watermark of EU authority. Margaret Thatcher signed away many of our vetoes through the Single European Act because she was led to believe the Single European Act was the last European treaty Britain would have to sign up to, though this was not the case. The truth is the EU will not stop until Europe has become a federal superstate. All treaties of the European Union clearly set out the principle of member states continuing to seek ever closer union, which means the EU gradually evolves into a single, unified state while the member states are reduced to mere provinces of federal Europe. The only way to prevent the UK from becoming a European province is to get Britain out of the EU. I agree with that. I agree with that entirely. Myth 9. Britain would drive... This is just fucking nonsense. This shouldn't even be a thing. But anyway. Myth 9. Brexit would drive European Premier League footballers out of the UK. Firstly, who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? pay our guys more. Let's get back to grassroots football. Let's not import players from around the world. Let's train our players to be as good as the rest of the players around. Anyway, this claim by the Guardian newspaper suggests that 2/3 of European football stars in England wouldn't meet the criteria used for non-European overseas players. We would set the criteria. It'd be our rules that said where they could stay. I've got to stop raging. I'm trying not to rage about this, but it just irritates me. It's so fucking stupid. Players to automatically qualify for a work visa. This led the paper to predict that Premier League football squads would be decimated if the UK voted to leave the EU. The truth is, leaving the EU would enable the Football Association and the government to loosen the requirements for foreign footballers to play in Britain. The FA itself has recognised the recent restrictions on skilled immigration from non-EU countries are the direct consequence of the EU's freedom of movement rules. Leaving the EU would enable the UK to relax the current requirements for foreign footballers to obtain a sponsorship licence from the FA. This would enable more top footballers from both inside and outside of the European Union to play in Britain. Of course it would. So anyway, okay, myth number 10. Many EU rules will still be in place after leaving. Some civil servants and Europhiles are saying that the UK will be beset with legal difficulties following our exit from the EU. They say it will take up to 10 years for us to completely unravel ourselves from the EU. In addition to the current lengthy renegotiation process, they claim Brexit would be forced to retain... They claimed Britain would be forced to retain many EU rules, regulations and directives. Truth. A managed withdrawal from the EU will place British interests first. Reports on Brexit for the Institute of Economic Affairs have identified over 3,000 pieces of EU legislation, which would ideally need to be reformed or repealed following Britain leaving the EU. Britain would still retain membership of the World Trade Organisation, the World Customs Organisation, and its countless UN appointments concerning international regulation. We would simply remove the most negative aspects of the EU red tape. While 10 years might sound long, it is likely to be an overestimate, which also demonstrates the appalling amount of interference Brussels has over Britain. Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty states a member state leaving the EU will undergo 2 years to negotiate its terms. Being one of the biggest customers of EU goods, such talks will go favourably. Even pro-EU Prime Minister Tony Blair admitted Britain would have access to the single market, just as Norway and Switzerland do. Brexit should be as cordial as possible, keeping former laws until they are gradually replaced, reformed or repealed will result in the most stable outcome. So that's from the getbritainout.org. I'm not going to do a balance. If you want to do a video reply with your balance for the other side, then that's fine. But so you can see why I'm leaning to the out campaign. I think if you want to do something about balance, if you want to balance this argument out, make a video reply and I'll link it and you can link me and we can sort of debate something. But I personally think that we will be better off out of Europe because we can govern ourselves. I'm not that bothered about immigration. I don't think that it's had such a negative effect. However, I do think if there's less people able to just wander in the UK and take up jobs at minimum wage, then wages will increase. Those people will have to go back home, which means there's going to be less strain on the NHS, less strain on housing, less strain on everything really, and that's going to be better for British people, the people within the United Kingdom that have voted the government in power, and that would be who would be creating our laws and doing things, and we would have far more influence over that body of people than we do over the bureaucrats in Europe, which aren't interested in what we think about what they're doing. They're just doing stuff, shuffling papers, writing paper. Well, we've created a white paper. It took us 4 years and it cost X, about £1 million, but it's okay because everyone's paying tons of money into the European Union. So that's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I can't promise to reply to everything on this channel. There's going to be far too much going on, hopefully, with people's different opinions. This is very much an opinionated channel, and my opinion will differ for yours, and you may want to take me to task on some things. You may want to correct me about some stuff. I don't claim to know everything. I'm not a great political mind. I'm just a normal person who's trying to weigh up the pros and cons, and at the moment I'm leaning very heavily towards voting out of Europe. So thanks for watching. I would like you to subscribe and like this video, but most of all I would like you to share this on Facebook. If you're an outer like me, you want to get out of Europe, these because of the way our media and everything is set up in the UK, all we're hearing is this scary stuff. Al-Qaeda's coming! I think they're gone now, aren't they? Isn't it ISIS? Now ISIS is back! They're behind them, they got sticks! That's all we're getting right now. We're going to be, we're going to be under siege. Little island, we're going to have all this ISIS around us trying to stab us. That seems to be what all the news is about. Oh, it's going to be terrible. There's going to be so many mass suicides. You won't know what to do with yourselves. You should have stayed in Europe. When I think that's not a very good way to put a point across it, and to scare people into... Scaring people to stay into Europe is a really stupid thing to do, because we'll just be unhappy when we realise it's a load of bollocks. And maybe there'll be a revolution. Maybe we'll overthrow the government. Maybe I'll be elected as king of England. Maybe I'll be the king, and I'll tell us what... And I'll just say, right, no, you're not having that. Or, I don't know what it is they wanted, but they're not having it. This is all ours. We're keeping this, and that you can have that one. Because I'm a fair person, I'll give them one of the things. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you liked it. I'll see you later on. Love you. Bye.